Now call Treasury Wine Estates.
Good questioning. Well done.
So, information on parliamentary privilege and the protection of witnesses giving evidence to Senate committees has been provided to you. For the Hansard record, would you please state your full names and the capacity in which you appear today?
Karen Petty, Chief Supply and Sustainability Officer.
Fiona Anderson, Senior Legal Counsel and Representative on the Wine Industry Code of Conduct Committee.
Thank you. Would you like to make a short opening statement before we ask questions?
Sorry, can you hear us?
The air conditioning's really loud. Thanks.
Righto. Is that good? Righto.
Please,
So thank you for inviting Treasury Wine Estates to participate in today's hearing. My name is Karen Petty and I am TWE's Chief Supply and Sustainability Officer. Joining me today is Fiona Anderson, TWE's Senior Legal Counsel and our representative on the Wine Industry Code of Conduct Committee. Together, we each have over 20 years' experience in TWE. Throughout my career living and working in key grape growing regions across Australia, I've witnessed firsthand the changing dynamics of the wine market and the fluctuations in supply and demand. This has provided me with real understanding of the importance of the wine industry to these communities. This is not just an economic issue, it's about livelihoods, generational legacy and the fabric of these rural and regional communities. By way of background, TWE is a leading luxury wine company operating in over 70 markets worldwide. We manage a global portfolio of wine brands and over the years we have adopted a premiumisation strategy to align with market trends, consumer behaviours and our vision to become the world's leading luxury wine company. This is something that we've communicated openly and regularly with our growers, our team members and external stakeholders. As a result of this strategy, the profile of our supply has changed over the years and now less than 10% of our grower contracts relate to grapes from inland regions. In Australia, TWE is both a wine producer and a grower. We hold over 6,000 hectares of vineyards in Australia and several wineries. We're acutely aware of the significant challenges facing commercial growers in Australia, particularly in the inland regions such as the Riverland, Riverina and Sunraysia. These challenges are compounded by extreme weather events, limited and reduced access to water, changing consumer preferences and market access issues. These factors have created a perfect storm, all leading to the current structural oversupply of commercial grade red wine grapes. It is important to note that these challenges extend beyond Australia's inland regions and reflect a global trend affecting grape growers in the United States, France, South America, to name a few. TWE takes pride in building and maintaining strong relationships with our growers while fostering open communication and transparency. We are not supplied by a cooperative group, rather have individual relationships with growers, many of which are long-term. Our approach and how we structure our relationships is based on our positive and collaborative grower network. TWE has been a signatory to the voluntary code since its inception in 2009. We believe it's a valuable framework providing fair and equitable commercial terms between growers and winemakers while also supporting the growth and development of mutually beneficial relationships. While the wine industry is no stranger to cycles of supply and demand, today's challenges are different, given the current structural oversupply of commercial red wine grapes. TWE has publicly advocated for targeted support for commercial grape growers and measures to protect the reputation of Australia as a leading wine exporter. We remain committed to working collaboratively with industry stakeholders and government to ensure sustainable outcomes for growers, producers and exporters alike. Thank you, and I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you, Karen. Good. Senator Ruston, I'll go to you, Senator Pocock.
Okay. Thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate your presence. You would have heard me ask the previous witness about why we didn't get a submission. Same question for you.
Yeah.
It's great to have you here, but why didn't the Senate get a submission from you?
We contributed to the peak body AGW's submission and also the Code of Conduct Committee. So we saw value in standing behind our peak body of AGW and worked very closely with that contribution. So our voice and our points are clearly made in their submission.
Okay, thank you. You are, as you said, a signatory to the code and have been since 2009, I think you said, when it began. Mm-hmm. What's your response to the submissions we've heard that it should become mandatory?
Look, we're open to understanding more on this front. I mean, whatever improves the industry situation. I mean, the heart of this issue, there is a structural oversupply, and I'm not convinced that the mandatory code will change that. But we are open-minded in terms of whatever is for the benefit of the industry. We're open to participate in. I think the other point to make is, as you've heard from not only the previous speaker but speakers before that, it's a complex issue. So making sure we have a collaborative process that's well understood so that everyone's voice is heard is a process that's necessary.
So you will have heard the growers earlier say the code is not a silver bullet, even if it becomes mandatory.
Correct.
But we have heard a number of very specific changes from growers that they are seeking: earlier notification of price, penalties for failure to meet elements of the code. Are there any particular changes that you've heard of or seen in submissions? Not that I assume you've studied them all, but I'm sure you've caught the general flavour.
Yes.
Pardon?
Yes, we have read them all.
Yeah, good. Thank you. That's wonderful. But yes, so what's your response to the elements that people are seeking change in the code?
I mean, what I took from that is a diversity of opinions on all these things, and that sort of goes to my point of consultation. There is no silver bullet. It is a complex issue. I don't think we can step away from the heart of this issue or the crux of this issue being an oversupply situation. The amendments, I mean, there is an effective committee that governs this, and I'd advocate for the voice of all these submissions to be heard through the committee, so the committee can respond accordingly.
Can you see any unintended consequences of the code becoming mandatory, with your knowledge of the industry?
Oh, look, the way we abide to the code, we have no issues that sit around that we can't resolve. So no, not at this point in time.
Okay.
You've got a perspective?
No. Okay. You've made a shift strategically towards the premiumisation, if I've got the terminology correct. Can you just say a little more about why you have shifted away from inland suppliers?
I mean, all of our discussions. Actually, I might start by saying we've been talking about this for several years now in terms of our premiumisation strategy, and we've been doing that quite overtly through shareholder discussions, market discussions, and grower discussions. So that's the point I would like to make up front. It generally comes around to consumer preferences. So what we're seeing in terms of consumer preferences of drinking less, the alternatives, drinking less but better.
Quality.
We've definitely jumped on that last point of drinking less but better, and we know that the margins are better and there is a more profitable business in the luxury side of the business.
Right.
The other point that was touched on with the previous speaker is this is a global issue as well. This isn't a market opening type discussion where we can market our way out of the surpluses in this industry. The structural issue here is being felt around the globe, and consumer preferences are changing globally.
In terms of your operation, you hold 6,000 hectares, so you're a very serious grower in your own right, but vertically integrated.
Yes.
What proportion of your crush comes from internal versus external suppliers?
I don't have the exact number to mind.
Ballpark?
I'd say 20%, maybe more.
50?
20.
20% is internally grown.
I'd have to fact check that, but
so how many suppliers have you got, ballpark? Producers outside?
In this region, we have in the inland region we have 40 growers.
40 growers.
Yep.
And can you give us a sense about the length of contract? And
average length is actually 5 years.
5 years? Yep.
Which we think bodes well for the types of relationship we seek to have with growers in this region.
So 5 years of contracting. What would be the average length of contract Treasury has with its?
No, the average length is about 5 years.
The average length is 5.
Yeah, I think over 75% range from sort of 2+ years. So the average length is 5 years.
Okay. And amongst those 40 or so external suppliers from within this area, what's your kind of legal picture? Do you have many disputes with your suppliers, or have you been able to have the relationships that you've spoken of that you strive for with those 40?
No, we're very proud of our relationships with our growers. I think over the years we may have had sort of 4 or 5 disputes, and only one of them has gone to the code. So we've been able to resolve those issues just between mutual negotiations with the grower before the appointment of an independent expert. So I think only one has gone to the code where an independent expert was appointed.
So is it a fair statement then, and I'll hand over because I know my time is short, to say that careful attention to long-term relationships that are commercially respectful and as transparent as possible has allowed you to meet the obligations of a code voluntarily, and probably even if it was converted to mandatory, without any problems?
I wouldn't extend to the mandatory just yet without that consultation point I made earlier, but acting under the clarity of the code, that's a great framework to create a transparent environment. So having standards within any relationship helps both parties know where they stand, and that's been effective in that respect.
And can you say a little more about what you mean by the appropriate consultation? What would you like to see if we did move to, if there was a recommendation, what does it need to do
Look,
to get that
I'm
right?
conscious of our size and the perception of that, so I want to make sure that whether it's a small grower, a medium-sized grower or a large grower, they have a voice at the table and that is heard. So whatever changes are proposed, they reflect the industry, not individual parties within that.
Great, thank you. By size is really important, clearly. And in terms of penalties, we've heard evidence that a code without penalties is not a code worth really having written down. Do you believe there should be significant penalties for breaches of a code like this?
It's very hard to comment on penalties when you don't actually see, I guess, the regime and the mandatory regime that's set up. So it's very difficult to comment on penalties. What I would say though is there's so many significant benefits to the code. I think you mentioned it's not worth having a code unless there's penalties, but the code does, create a really sort of positive tool, especially around contracting practices, like setting out minimum terms that are there to protect the grower, basic things from having a contract in writing, specifying maturity, purity and condition standards, minimum pricing terms as well. So I think it's important to, and as we've also heard, the dispute resolution procedures, which are there to protect the growers. So I think it's important also to focus on the benefits there as well.
So as an experienced legal counsel for a large player in the industry, you see positives in a level playing field around the code's clauses and provisions. So is that a fair statement?
Oh, absolutely. I think the code sets out a really good and important framework that underpins the relationship between winemakers and growers, and it's a really important tool for the industry. Always looking at ways to improve and get more signatories, but I think it's a really valuable tool, and Treasury is proud of our relationships with our growers. And
Okay.
Yeah.
And you will have heard a number of suggestions for how the code might be improved for the benefits of growers in terms of timing and pricing and so on, which you are recommending there should be consultation around, as I understand. Yeah. Great. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks. Sorry, I'll just say Fiona. So the one occasion where you did have to go to use the code and go to a third-party arbitrator, was there any dispute around that decision?
No.
So
we had a discussion with the grower and we couldn't arrive on price.
Yeah.
So we notified the grower that the best steps for him would be to lodge a dispute. So send details to him of the form that he needs to complete. He sends the form off to the Code Secretariat and lodges a dispute. And then both parties either appoint an independent expert or the Code Secretariat appoints an independent expert.
Yep.
The independent expert is appointed. They go off and do their thing and make a determination and return that determination to both parties, and that determination is binding.
Are you aware of any decisions, apart from the one we're discussing today with Accolade, where it's got to that point and then the parties to that arbitration haven't agreed to the decision of the third party?
No, I haven't heard of any.
Okay. So in the Riverland, you said, was it 40 growers that you...
Not in the Riverland, the extended inland region.
Inland.
Sorry.
So it's
okay.
quite spread, mainly Sunraysia through the Riverland.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts? Well, obviously, we're dealing mostly with the commercial aspect of wine and grape production in today's hearing. Do you have any thoughts on other, like more premium areas, whether it's South Australia or elsewhere, as to whether there's been any concerns around mandatory versus voluntary codes?
I don't know, anything specific from the premium regions. No, I haven't heard anything that puts straight back like this. It seems to be more a inland region issue that is related to the surpluses in this region. So that obviously puts
Yeah.
pressure on the dimensions of this operation, and that's driving a lot of the conversation, I expect.
Okay. And has Dr. Craig Emerson been in touch with you in his consultations
Yes,
more
he
broadly
has.
on the industry?
Yes, he has.
He has, okay. And what, recently or
Sorry, I didn't hear the question.
recently?
In the last couple of weeks, yeah. He's reached
Okay.
out to us and asked a couple of questions.
Good, okay. Well, perhaps my last question, because unfortunately we are running behind time. Have you, to at least your growers in the broader area we're discussing today, have you provided pricing on the second Wednesday of
Yes.
okay, and that was yesterday. And are you able to say, and I'll ask the same question to all the witnesses today, is it in any way related to the spot price of wholesale wine, or do you, like previous winemakers have told us earlier, you work backwards from your own demand for your product, and then
Correct. Yeah.
can you give us any more ideas on what metrics you use to set that price?
I think a point I wouldn't mind making is our contracts in these commercial areas have minimum prices in them, so that is one point of difference, probably to others. But in terms of the pricing, our pricing is relatively flat to prior years, but that's off a relatively good base as well. So the same mechanics that most people use to determine price exist with us. The difference is your internal supply and demand balances, as Mr. Rosso said. So.
And because you're a member of the code, as Accolade is, and others who do provide this update on the second Wednesday, do you think it's fair that there are a number of other winemakers that sort of sit back and watch the bigger players like yourself set the market, and then kind of, I suppose, opportunistically offer prices below the market?
I can't speak for others. I can speak to ourselves and our compliance with the code. I also have a point around I suppose the reason why the date is quite relevant to producers, and some of those have been spoken about before, which is you are going through a peak season in terms of selling wine, so your outlook goes from more of a forecast-oriented number to an actual number, and that gives you quite a clear view of kind of where you're going. So I get why it is where it is as well, but in terms of others' behaviour around it, no, I don't have a perspective on it.
No worries. Okay. Well, I think that's all from us. So thank you. And as said to previous witness, we may have questions for you on notice. And the committee set a date of 20th of December if we could get responses. But I do appreciate that's a very tight turnaround. So we'll let you know if that's the case.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. So we've pushed through the break.